Peter Swirski will be talking about Ars Americana, Ars Politica of democracy and its deficit. Uh, just a little bio note. Peter Swirski has been featured in Canadians' Who's Who. But what's interesting about him, in the course of talking to him this afternoon, I found out he's an incredible life, and I should talk about his life. It may explain a lot of what he's writing and talking about. He's half German, quarter Ukrainian, quarter Lithuanian, born in Poland, and on the way to Greece, where he worked for the United Nations, he lived in Hungary. From Greece, I'm trying to stitch together this piece of information that I jotted down while I was talking to him today. From Greece, he immigrated to French Canada, subsequently worked in English Canada, and ended up heading an American Studies program in Hong Kong, where he also became a Chinese citizen. At present, he is a Finnish national and professor and research director at the Helsinki Collegium for Advanced Studies. He's also a professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis, an honorary professor at Jinan University in China. His research ranges from American literature and American studies to interdisciplinary studies in literature, philosophy, and science. He's also the world's foremost critic on the late legendary writer and philosopher Stanislaw Lem. He was featured on European, Russian, and Chinese television. He's the author of 12 acclaimed books, including the best-selling From Lowbrow to Nobrow, and the National Book Award-nominated Ars Americana, Ars Politica. With several foreign translations, his books have been reviewed from The Guardian to the Financial Times, and from Philosophy and Literature to the International Journal of Philosophical Studies. I am betting on a very exciting lecture tonight, and please help me in welcoming Peter Swirski.
Hello. I've been an educator for 20 years, which means that I was a student around 20 years ago, and I'm kind of delighted to see that not much has changed. When I was a student, we used to sit in the back as well. No one dared to come close. I don't know why. I don't spit, so if you feel like it, you can really come closer. It's always nice to look people in the eye. I sort of assume that everybody who comes here begins with a long roster of things and how grateful they are to come here. So am I, but I'm going to do you one better than that. I was invited, I understand, to talk about this little red book of mine, Ars Americana. I do promise I will get around to it, okay? But I also understand that some of you may have had a chance to read it, some of it, parts of it. So it wouldn't make much sense to talk about what's in the book, since I presume, right or wrong, that you may know what's in it. So instead of talking about the book, I would like to talk about a country. I'm certain that all of you know what country I have in mind, but let me refresh your memory, okay? This is going to be a very, very brief history of the country that I want to talk about. It began as a loose confederation of independent states. The states were quite diverse, culturally, geographically, in terms of their history of settlement, in terms of their language, in terms of their climate, people, customs, and so on and so on. At a crucial point in the 18th century, 13 of these states federated, got together, became a nation, declared independence, declared that we are going to be now united as a state. Interestingly enough, all the states retained their powers, retained their specificity, and they do so to this very day. As a matter of fact, all this is written into the Constitution. Because of these differences between the states, bear with me. Because of these differences between the states, there was a civil war. A few of the states wanted to secede roughly in the mid-19th century. There was a civil war which was won by the North. What else? Today, well, that state has a presidency, it has a bicameral parliament, it has a president, free elections. It is described as a great living experiment in multi-ethnic, multilinguistic, multi-religious, and multicultural experiment, if you like. It is also a beacon of democracy to the rest of the world. And I'm pretty sure that all of you know exactly what country, what state I have in mind. I am, of course, talking about Switzerland. The reason so many of you, I presume, gauging by your laughter, the reason so many of you presumed I was talking about the United States is that, strange as the idea may sound, the two countries do have a lot in common. I don't have too much time to talk about these similarities. I am working against the clock, I realize that. But I would like to mention a few, simply to suggest that even though on paper we're talking about the old world and the new world, we're talking about a giant with 308 million people versus a very small country, a European country with not 308 but 8 million people. There's a difference, gigantic difference in size. The United States occupies half a continent. Switzerland is the size, if I'm not mistaken, of Vermont and New Hampshire put together, roughly 10% of California. So there are immense differences. So you might think, what the hell do they have in common? Well, they do a few things. So let me suggest just a couple, okay, before I move on. Those historical and political affinities are not an accident. There was traffic between the two countries from the very beginning, and I mean from the very, very beginning. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, in a gesture as religious as political, the pilgrims who were emigrating from Leiden in Europe to, well, what later became New England, carried with them a copy of the Geneva Bible. There was a very, very specific gesture that meant to, if you will, uphold their loyalty to a certain canon of both religious and political principles that were embraced by the Calvinists in Geneva at that time. In fact, the 1620 Mayflower Covenant is specifically indebted and based by the spirit of Calvinism. In the 19th century, things worked the other way around. It was Switzerland's turn to learn from the United States, to embrace, if you like, the principles that were already in place in America. In 1848, Switzerland was reinventing itself, modernizing its constitution, and they deliberately borrowed from the United States, so much so that that's where they got their bicameral system. So in Switzerland these days, you have the Swiss Federal Assembly, which is equivalent to the Congress, and it also has the upper and the lower chamber, i.e. the House and the Senate. This is not an accident. I emphasize they were deliberately borrowing from a country that they felt they had a lot to learn and borrow from at that time. So much so, as a matter of fact, that when in 1919 Woodrow Wilson was looking for a place to locate the newly founded League of Nations, which, as you know, at that time was conceived as an embryo of a future world government, he settled on none other place than Geneva once again, in view of these ongoing, if you like, political, cultural transactions, exchanges between the two countries. So there are similarities between these two countries, but needless to say, they do differ. And the major difference that I see between Switzerland and the United States is that one of them is a democracy and the other one is not. Now, you may be asking yourselves, which one is it? I am sort of awash now in the blood of the sacred cow that I'm slaughtering here. But I am going to try to convince you, to give you some reasons to believe alongside myself, that the Swiss system is a working very well democracy, direct, to be specific, semi-direct democracy, not the United States. Now, I'm going to adopt a very, very simple definition of democracy, okay? Completely foolproof as far as I'm concerned. Without any political theory, a democracy is a system that respects and reflects the political will of the people. It's really as simple as that. If all of us here want something, the state in which we live, assuming that all of us are all the members of that state ought to reflect it, okay? We all should have a say in what we are going to do with our country, with our lives in that country. So that's my definition of a democracy. Why do I say that the United States is not a democracy? Well, every 4 years we go through the rigmarole of presidential elections, and we're often told that we live in a democracy because we elect the president. Well, of course, this is not true, and you all know that. We just don't pause to think how things might go wrong, where the train goes off the rails. Well, I'm going to give you two very simple examples. One of them you're probably very familiar with, since it's very recent. The other one maybe not so. So let me begin in the 19th century, 1876. Okay, the race once again was between two horses, the Republicans and the Democrats. And in 1876, the Republicans fielded Rutherford B. Hayes, a highly decorated brigade commander from the Civil War. The Democrats were fielding Samuel Tilden, I believe, yes, a reformer celebrated for taking on Tammany Hall. Things don't really change much, do they, over centuries? No. What happened is that the campaign, Hayes's campaign, was so shadowy that, believe it or not, he actually acquired a new nickname during the campaign. From Rutherford B. Hayes, he became Rutherford B. Hayes. Perhaps to these shenanigans, he lost the popular vote. The people voted, and they cast more votes for Tilden. Now, in a democracy, listen once again, a democracy is a system that reflects the will of the people, of the little people, of every little citizen in the country. In a democracy, it would be Samuel Tilden who would be sent to the White House. Instead, because of the razor-thin electoral majority, okay, one vote, it was Hayes that got sentenced to 4 years in a federal institution. So there you go. You have a system where people vote one way, and the system, the electoral system, spits out the wrong president. I'm saying wrong because he was not elected by the people. Now, you may think that this happened only once and this is just a one-off, an anomaly. Well, we all like to think so. I don't have time to go into too many details because I have to race on, but I assure you, if you look at the numbers, and I did, not in this book, unfortunately, in the next book I wrote, it's simply appalling. We are teetering on the brink almost every 8 years on average of doing precisely that same thing, of not electing, not sending the executive officer into the White House that we actually voted for. The year is 2000. You all remember what happened, right? I don't care so much what happened with the recount of the vote in Florida, okay? I don't want to presume which side of the political spectrum you may be on, left or right or middle or up and down. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that Al Gore got 500,000 more votes than George W. Bush. He won, hands down, no questions about it, the popular vote. The people of the United States elected their president. The people wanted one person and one person only to go to the White House and run them, represent them. That did not happen. What kind of democracy is that? Well, you have to ask yourself, if it can happen at least once a century, and I assure you this is not the only time, there were 4 such cases as a matter of fact, and we were in danger of doing the same thing, i.e. electing the person that did not get the majority of votes on a number of occasions. We came very, very, very close to it, okay? Now, what kind of democracy is it? How long are we going to lie to ourselves that we elect the president? We don't. I assure you, this year, if we all cast our votes one way, we may end up with a president we did not vote for, with the men, they happen to be men, with the men that got fewer votes than the other guy. Now, what's wrong? It seems to me a lot. It seems to me this is not a democracy. We are being told we live in one, but we actually don't practice one. That's as much as I want to say about the United States. And I want to move across the continent to tell you about another country, Switzerland, and tell you just in a few words, in a few minutes, how they run their business and why I think that their democracy is a real democracy, whereas ours is really a shambles. I don't even want to go into this one person, one vote thing. You know, this is not true, right? We like our system so much that we actually like to go abroad and to force feed other nations, other people into adopting our system. But once again, we don't practice what we preach. We don't have a one person, one vote system. Votes are not equal. Votes are not even. Think of the bicameral parliamentary system we have. A state of Wisconsin elects the same number of senators as the state of New York, California. Wisconsin has a tiny, tiny, tiny number of people. They wield so much more power per person, per vote, than people electing senators in California or New York or Texas or anywhere else. There is staggering disparity, staggering anomalies. We do not practice the one person, one vote. Your vote and your vote, they are not equal. Switzerland is a very, very different country. I'm going to use one word that all of you probably know very well from the experience of California, for example. This word is referendum. I'm Canadian, by the way, and we had a referendum on whether Quebec was going to secede. We had our own equivalent of the Civil War, secede from Canada. It's been an ongoing process, and we formed a neologism. We called it a neverendum rather than a referendum. This is often the case, but let me tell you in a bit more detail how the referenda or neverenda work in the country that practices them with admirable precision, the precision of a, forgive me, Swiss watch. The year was 1848, and I think this is the date that every human being, every citizen of every country ought to remember. It's a very important date. In the year 1848, Switzerland passed the right of referendum. Okay, it's a law in the Constitution. What it does is that it binds the government. Okay, there is no exception. It binds the government. You must do this. No matter who sits in the office, they have to do this. And what do? The right of referendum binds the government to put any act of parliament to national vote. In other words, yes, in Switzerland we do have elected officials. We have politicians, okay? We need them, okay? We need bakers, we need teachers, we need everybody. We need politicians, people who professionally devote themselves to running the affairs of the country. But it doesn't matter what laws they pass. They can pass whatever they like. If we, as citizens of the country, we the people, we the jury, if you like, don't like the laws they pass, then we have a right to appeal. We have a right to put that law that is already law, okay, to the national vote and scrap it if we don't like it. The rules are very simple. Provided 50,000 people, that's about 0.5% of the population, very, very, very small number, very small margin. If 50,000 people sign a petition within 3 months, 90 days of the law being passed, that we should have such a referendum, it will be held. There are no exceptions. It's the law. It's the highest law of the country. So I can, for example, as a president, I can propose a law that is going to ban wearing glasses. Everybody has to wear contacts, okay, or go semi-blind, myopic around the world, okay? It's a stupid law. It seems to me any one of you would find it offensive, whether you wear glasses or not. It seems to me very easily any one of you would launch a, internet petition to gather 50,000 signatures, and lo and behold, as long as enough people find that law useless, self-indulgent, multiply your adjectives any way you like, then that law is going to go into a national referendum. And then the country will vote and decide, do we keep that stupid law that you can't wear glasses, or do we scrap it? We are always the ultimate juror of what happens with the politics in our country, in Switzerland. But this is not the end. In the year 1891, I believe, yes, 1891, I want to be very, very sure because these are very important dates. Switzerland passed another groundbreaking, fundamental law. Again, it's in the Constitution. It's the right of initiative. And here how it works. Any one of you, any citizen of the country can take the role of the political leader at any time whatsoever. If I believe that there ought to be a law that isn't, it doesn't exist, okay? For example, let's say that I'm let's say that I'm crazy, and I do hate people wearing glasses, and I just don't want to see the glasses around me. I have a right, providing I gather 100,000 signatures, so the bar is a little higher, but I have a much lenient time period, 18 months, a year and a half. So if I gather 100,000 signatures within 18 months, then I can propose a law that is, once again, without any exceptions, without any buts or ifs, is going to go to a national referendum. And the people of the country will vote on my law. I presume that this being a very kooky law, Anouar is wearing glasses, David is. I normally wear glasses. I wanted to look good today, so I put my contacts in. Okay, but yes, you would catch me wearing glasses on my, non-performance day. This being a very kooky law, I presume that I would not gather the requisite number of signatures. But just think for a moment, what if by some stroke of luck I gauge the mood of the nation in such a way that, yes, indeed, each and every one of you, or the vast majority, really harbors a lot of resentment towards people wearing glasses. All of a sudden, we can do something about it. You can rally around my petition. You can put your name on it. You can participate in the political process of the country. You have that right, and it's guaranteed to you. It's not going to be taken away from you. You are the politician of Switzerland. Amateur politician, if you like, but there are none other. Everybody is a politician in Switzerland, or at least everybody has the right to be one, to act as one. The right of referendum and the right of initiative guarantee such immense sweeping powers to the people of Switzerland. I'll give you one example, one consequence of it, okay? Do you know what happens when Obama or Bush or whoever it is, when they go to mingle with the public? Does it ever happen? Do you ever see the president walk into a corner store and shake hands without, what is it now, 400 or 600 security detail behind him, around him? Snipers on the roofs, tanks on the ready, Air Force One, Air Force Two, Air Force 1,000,001, whatever it is. You know, billions and billions of dollars being pumped into protecting the man who is representing us. He's our guy. Who would want to hurt him? That doesn't happen in Switzerland. Because politicians are, I'm going to use a strong word just for the heck of it, okay? It's not the case. But because politicians are emasculated, because they are essentially politically neutered, because they are not the, if you like, power wielders, but only the executors of our people's, citizens' will, political will, it is absolutely common, and I have had that experience of being pointed out, a guy, okay, standing in line to buy local bakery produce as being the vice president of the country. And I couldn't believe it. I was saying, what's going on? Where am I? The moon? No, that's the way it happens. Nobody assassinates politicians in Switzerland because they are essentially powerless. Because to really terrorize the country, to cut off the Hydra head, political head of the country, you would have to assassinate 8 million people, i.e. all citizens of Switzerland. That's where the power lies. That's where it is. That's how it is distributed. That's what it's all about. These are the reasons that I believe Switzerland is a democracy. Okay? To be precise, we often like to simplify things in politics, the famous soundbite. We call it a direct democracy. It is, but it's actually a semi-direct democracy. We do have politicians in Switzerland, and they work very well. Okay? But they work for us. And they always will, as long as we maintain the system that we all so very much like. Let me tell you very briefly about a few differences. I started talking about the consequences of having this type of political system in Switzerland. Let me tell you about 3 more before I finally pass on to Ars Americana. First of all, one of the major differences between the two countries is that we in America like to invest a lot of power, to concentrate power in one-person offices, the mayor, the governor, the president, of course. This is emphatically not the case in Switzerland. I cannot overemphasize this fact. At every echelon of politics in Switzerland, you are dealing with a group. It's never one individual. As a matter of fact, there is a council of ministers, 7 ministers. And believe it or not, the president is selected, it's basically one of the ministers. And the president has, are you ready? Exactly 0 extra powers. He's still, let's assume that I am a member, okay, of one of the 7-member ministerial council of Switzerland, and I am, chosen to be the president. I still retain my ministerial portfolio, so if I was looking after finance, I still look after finance. My role is primarily ceremonial. The Swiss president is mainly elected to shake hands during photo ops. It's because, powers that be that visit Switzerland like to meet with one person, shake hands with, one guy rather than 7. That's why we have the president. All decisions are made by the group, at the highest level by the group of 7, but at every point you have a group, you have a collective. Now, what that means, first of all, is that you don't have the, horse race winner takes all that we mostly have in the United States, which does not represent people once again. Let me give you an example. In the, what year was it? 1992, I believe, Ross Perot was running, right? Believe it or not, he got 20 million votes, and he got exactly 0 electoral votes. Now, I'm not here to endorse or to criticize Ross Perot. Make up your own mind. That's what really political education ought to be about. But what I want to tell you is that the political will of 20 million people was completely erased. It was not reflected by the system. 20 million American citizens who wanted to see Ross Perot in the White House got shafted. The system in place does not reflect the will of the people. It's different in Switzerland. We have a representational system. So yes, you can be guaranteed that your vote will count. Your rep will be elected, as long as you're not the only person who is voting for President Swirski, for example. Your rep will get elected, and they will duly serve. This allows me to segue a rickety way to the second point, the second major difference, the inclusiveness of the Swiss system. I've been here for 2 days, enjoying myself hugely, pigging out on wonderful, wonderful seafood here in Portland. But I've been also watching some television, and I can't tell you what channel it was, who was speaking. I was just surfing. But there was a series of very brief interviews with people in the street, little people, citizens, men and women like all of us here together. And the question posed to them was, what's wrong with American politics right now? And you should listen to the litany of this and that and that and that and that. But one theme that was coming up over and over again was how divisive it was, how little dialogue, how little cooperation, how little collective spirit there was in the United States these days, how completely, insanely polarized we've become. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. All the wrangling over budgets. This does not happen in Switzerland. Once again, let me jump for a moment to my example of the 7-member ministerial council. Presidents are elected, I believe, for 1 year, and they rotate. In other words, you are guaranteed, as long as you get into the council, you are guaranteed to become the president of the state, at least once every 7 years, assuming you will stay on the council, This is done to ensure that nobody wields too much power, but it has another very desired effect. You know that if this guy is the president today, and I'm not willing to cooperate with him, well, next year the roles will be reversed. Everybody knows that. And it's a wonderful bromide, if you like. It really makes up for people cooperating, for people realizing that, well, we are in the same boat. We're simply switching roles. Today I'm the captain, you're the bosun, and tomorrow things will be the other way around. Today I'm sweeping the deck. I better do a good job and not complain and do what you want me to do, because tomorrow, next year, we'll be in the reversed position, and I will expect of you to do the right thing, to cooperate for the good of the people, for the good of the country. And if we misbehave, guess what? We're going to be recalled. There's going to be a referendum, because people can do this to us, and people are used to doing this. And if they are not happy with the things we're doing, they just do a referendum. They just, post a letter and gather signatures, and then there is a national vote. Crazy, isn't it? So the contributing factor to the success of the Swiss system is the inclusiveness. It's the way almost everybody is consulted, brought into the political process. And I really emphasize that. There are side effects. For example, it takes time to consult with every trade union, with every political lobby, with everybody who may have a vested interest in the new law that we are proposing, whether it's a law put on the table by a citizen, by a politician, or by a businessman who simply wants to see something done in the country, okay? It takes a while. But it almost guarantees that these laws and these referenda are almost never really necessary. As a matter of fact, if you study Switzerland, you realize that so many more referendums are filed than those that get to the voting stage. The very fact of a group of people being incensed or inspired enough to want to see a certain change in the country is enough to start the political process of consultation and proposing laws that will address that point, that issue. Perhaps not in such a, I don't want to say radical, what's the word I'm looking for? Perhaps not in such a sweeping way, but precisely because everybody is brought into the process, the law is adjusted, modified, trimmed a little, okay, and then it gets passed. And because everybody will have had a chance to be consulted and have their say, you don't have to, mind you, okay? If you want to watch TV, drink beer, watch, pro wrestling, whatever it is you want to do, it's fine. You don't have to participate. You let other people cast their vote. But you have the right, an inalienable, and this one is inalienable right, to be a politician of your country, to participate in the process through the referendum or through the initiative. And finally, and this is going to bring me around to Ars Americana, slowly running out of time. But no one's leaving the room, so I guess you're still here, you're still listening. The third, last, and perhaps most important factor in making the Swiss system work as well as it does, education. Needless to say, if you have dumb citizens, uneducated people, if you have people who cannot really fathom the consequences or even the language of the law or the initiative or the referendum that is being proposed or passed, well, this is not good. The Swiss system it demands good education. It demands a populace that knows what's going on. It demands a population that is educated well enough in all kinds of, not only political, economic, social, cultural matters, to the extent that they will be able to participate in the process, should they choose to do so. The Swiss educational system is very different than ours, and I don't have time to tell you more about it, okay, but I would urge you to study it. You may learn something in the process. I'm not presuming that you're going to like what you see. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But I can guarantee you the results. I have quite a few Swiss friends, and I've been to Switzerland many times. I've done quite a bit of research on this, as you probably gather. And I assure you, the Swiss people in general are well educated. They may not have their equivalent of Harvard or Yale or whatever university you pick as being the acme of being well educated. But their general level of education is extremely high. Certainly high enough to ensure that every citizen can play the role that they are supposed to play in the country, i.e. being, a standby politician, somebody that you can call upon to make a decision when it's necessary. Needless to say, before a referendum, there is a number of information sources made available to all the citizens. Booklets, pamphlets, internet, mailings, programs. One of them is called Arena. And if the image that leaps to your mind is that of, scantily clad, big-muscled wrestlers, that's not what's going on. People come on armed with pie charts and diagrams, a lot of rhetoric, and they try to persuade you in a simple, colloquial, easy-to-understand language because it's in their interest to make you understand what they are trying to say because they want you to vote their way. Okay? Democracy, I repeat that because if there's any, if you like, key lesson that I would like you to, put in your pocket and bring home and maybe later at night take it out, look at it and see how, marvelously it shines. It's just one. Democracy entails education, and education entails democracy. And as you probably guessed, this is the reason why I wrote my little red book. Is there anyone here who does not find politics, okay, I'll narrow it down, American politics, excruciatingly boring, tedious, dramatically, just, bone dry, circus sawdust dry? Is there anybody here who is, enthused, inspired to, go in the street and shout, "Oh man, I just listened to this brilliant speech. Oh, so great." Not too many of you. That's not surprising. Politics is inherently boring, which is surprising, by the way, because it's all about us. I mean, these guys make decisions. We have to abide by them, or we go to jail or whatever, but we really don't pay attention. And I think in some ways we are stupid to react in this way, and in some ways we are absolutely wise, because who wants to bother? You can't understand what they're saying. It's either totally meaningless, platitudes that we've heard a million times before, or it's something so abstruse, so complicated. I've the old standing joke about the American tax code, the best argument against intelligent design. What is it, 3 million words, 3.5 million words? And we are all supposed to be aware of it. We're all supposed to pay our taxes and know what's going on. It's crazy. It's either too simple or too complicated. But one way or another, it's boring. It's so nauseatingly, so tedious. Well, what's the answer? Michael Moore is the answer. P.J. O'Rourke is the answer. In the hallway today, chatting, I've heard people talk Colbert. Colbert seems to be very popular, rightly so. I don't know, you decide. But yeah, maybe this is the answer. How to make politics interesting. How to get people to actually sit down and listen and want to learn. I am amazed, by the way, that so many of you took the trouble on a cold, dark, wintry Maine night to come here, listen to a guy who was going to talk about politics, as you probably guessed from the title of my talk. It's bracing. It's very gratifying. I don't deserve the compliment. I think the subject does. I think all of you realize that politics is important. I mean, what else is there when it comes to the administration of the country? It's all about politics. But how to make people listen up? Well, I'm probably no different than you. I may have studied this, issue problem a little bit longer, which cost me half the brain, by the way. But what I wanted to do is to write a book about politics, but a different kind of book. The term I coined is Nobrow. Highbrow, intellectual, academic, and popular. We associate highbrow with being stilted, with being incomprehensible, jargon-ridden, right? And we associate popular with being pretty much meaningless, pulp for the masses. Well, there must be a middle way, and I think there is one, and it's Nobrow. If you want a slogan, think of beach books for intellectuals. Didn't you have a dream of going to the beach with an intellectual equivalent of, pick a name, you know, Tom Clancy, John Grisham, you know, Larry McMurtry? No, he's probably Nobrow already. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say? I was trying to write a different book. And let me share with you sort of 3 little points before I'm going to close. As I said, I don't want to talk about the details of what's in the book because I sincerely hope that you have had a chance to read it, or if not, that inspired by this effusion of political rhetoric and passion that you've had a chance to experience for the last almost an hour, that you will go home and grab a copy of the book and read it. I can't promise you you're going to agree with everything I say, but I can pretty much promise you that you will enjoy the read. I think it's a good read. Everybody, at least, who commented on the book told me so. But here's the bit of news. I tried to publish this book, and it got rejected, not just once, several times. It's not the rejection. It wasn't my first, probably won't be my last. It's not the rejection that was the sort of bone of contention here. It was what was conveyed to me by the publishers, academic publishers. Each and every one said pretty much the same thing, and they said this: I love the book, I read it in one night, but I'm not going to publish it because it's not academic enough. It's too journalistic. That's what was said to me. It reads too well and too fast. It does not provide room, scope for sustained reflection. I can see that all of you are going to run to the bookstore and order it tomorrow. And you know what? That's exactly what I would like you to do. I didn't want to write a boring book. If books have, you know, missions and goals, they are not to educate people first and foremost. It's to make people want to read them. What other goal can there be for a book? If you don't want to read it, you can be stuck with the most magnificent work of art or the most, you know, brilliantly analytical, political piece of nonfiction. So what if you don't want to read it? So what if you don't want to give the book a chance to educate you, to become a part of your life? You failed. Now, I'm not saying that I have succeeded. I'm not that... I don't have this much chutzpah, but I tried. Second thing I tried to do is that I tried to talk not about political literature, political art, but political. Let me explain. There is a wonderful film called The Player, Robert Altman's film. How many of you have seen it, perhaps, The Player? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 3.5. I wonder about the half. Have you seen half the film, or you watched every other minute of it? At the very beginning, there's a very telling scene. Somebody comes into the studio mogul's office and makes a pitch for a political film. And the producer listens and says, you know, political is good, political is okay, as long as you don't mean political. You see, there is political art. It's a safe, run-of-the-mill, orthodox political art. You schlep together a few characters, one of them may be a senator, and you provide them with a love story or a, you know, crime detection story, and that's your political fiction. Well, obviously, it has nothing to do with politics except for the setting. By the same token, a doctor-nurse romance would be a medical book, and that just doesn't stand to reason. So, second thing I tried to do in Ars Americana, Ars Politica, was to to take a very careful look at American political art. In other words, art, I say literature. There are 5 chapters, and they are on 5 pieces of literature. One of them is a film, which I'm dealing, I confess, mostly from the standpoint of the plot, of the script. I do talk about the cinematic aspects of it as well. But I am a literary scholar, and my emphasis is on literature in this case. Political literature, political art that is partisan, that takes no quarter, if you like. Political art that was written with an express purpose of expressing or endorsing or clarifying a certain very clearly identifiable political platform. Okay. Another thing I tried to do, and this is probably the main reason why this book differs from anything you may have read, is as follows. Most academics are, well, I don't know whether they are left-leaning or not, but every single book I have read, and I have read a lot of them in order to write this one, every single one dealt with, for lack of a better word, leftist, left-leaning political art, as if there was none other. It seems to be we as literary scholars, as academics, we have certain, preferences, biases, if you like, ideological, political, and we tend to reflect them. So much so that reading critical books on American political art, you would think that the American political right has never written a book or never made a film to say, j'accuse, I have a platform as well. Well, I've done something different. I looked at P.J. O'Rourke, who is, at his best, uproariously funny, very popular, and he wrote this marvelous book called Parliament of Whores. It's about the American Congress. So I've taken a very careful look at it. And if I may share a more personal anecdote, I had a chance to send a manuscript to PJ, and he was gracious enough to read it. And he sent me an email back, which pleased me to no end. I asked him for an endorsement, which he declined to provide. But he sent an email in which basically he acted like the Pope. He essentially absolved me from all the criticism that I leveled on his book, and expressed sheer delight with the many ways in which I found his book and his political views well defended, well argued, funny, if you like. 2 more things and I'm done. One last thing I want to share with you is an experience with another well-known public figure who is, alas, no longer with us, Howard Zinn, great American historian. Howard has been, I think I can safely say, a friend for the last few years before he passed away. And I also sent him the same chapter. I talk about Howard Zinn's work and P.J. O'Rourke in the same chapter, chapter 3. As it happens, I caught Howard in an imprecision, a mistake. Okay, I won't tell you what it is. I would like you to read the book. I would like you to buy a copy. But I did. And I was full of trepidation before sending the chapter to him. I mean, look, who am I to send, send a piece of criticism saying, look, you goofed. You pride yourself on being a historian, on, telling the truth, unlike all the other guys. But here's one big blunder that, that is out there. I was very much afraid, but I shouldn't have been. And I'm here to tell you that you can really gauge a greatness of a person, not just a scholar, academic, but a greatness of a person. When Howard replied, he said, look, I'm glad you put it there because it's going to make people on the right take the book seriously. And there was a remarkable statement from a scholar who was, very senior at that time, both in age and in stature. And it simply provided me, again, I'm not talking about Howard Zinn's political leanings, okay? I'm not presuming which way you are leaning. Like him, hate him, doesn't matter. I'm simply to tell you that a great educator stood by the truth, stood by the principles that we all ought to embrace as citizens, as students, as teachers, scholars, He said, it's all right. You are right. You are right to have said that, and I'm glad you did. As a matter of fact, Howard wrote, Ars Americana is fascinating and original, and the subject of political literature is endlessly interesting and important. This is what he wrote about the book. As I said, you can really remark on the greatness of a person who can deal with what I have done in such a way. I was amazed, speechless, and very grateful. The last thing I want to share with you, apropos education, apropos political education, is something that will probably startle you if you haven't been startled enough during this lecture. I want to talk about the Pentagon. The Defense Department. Now, you may think, what does that have to do with political fiction, with, books that try to deal with the American political culture, American popular political culture? What does that have to do with, the generals, the Pentagon? Well, I want to give you one example that just about blew me away when I learned it, and I'm pretty sure you haven't heard about it. If you have, correct me, okay? Tell me I'm wrong. I'll be happy to hear this. But I think this is something all of you ought to know, because if they do it, well, then there is something to the idea of learning and having fun at the same time, of learning through fictions, through political fictions. The Pentagon, believe it or not, is requesting, well, has been requesting soldiers on active duty and all the vets, and believe it or not, officials at the Defense Department, high-ranking officials at the Defense Department, to go to theater, to see a play. I kid you not. In the year 2009, a series, I believe, of 12 plays was combined into a sort of great running marathon of plays. They were called The Great Game, Afghanistan. It was a series of plays, political plays, designed to, that was in England, by the way, designed to introduce a history, long-standing history of a country and military interventions in that country to, well, the country that has had its hand in invading it and killing its citizens and, being responsible for all kinds of nasty and horrible things in it. In the year 2011, in February, I believe, these plays were brought to Washington, D.C. and performed, and the Pentagon insisted that, as I said, active soldiers and vets and its own high-ranking officials go and listen and educate themselves. By the way, this is very scary, right? In the year 2011, they were trying to educate themselves on the history of the country we've been bombing and doing all kinds of nasty things to for so many years. But still, better late than never, right? Well, they did the right thing, but they didn't organize any political speeches or lectures. They asked people to go see fiction, to see plays, to watch, actors perform. And I just have to say this. These people are not stupid. We may think some of them are, the decisions they make. If they feel that they can educate soldiers by making them acquaint themselves with political art, maybe there is more to political art, contemporary political partisan art, than we all think. So how about we all go and educate ourselves, as is our duty if we really think we live in a democracy? Thank you very much.
If you have any questions, please use the microphone. There are the microphones on both sides.
Thank you for your talk. What does Switzerland do, or how are political parties situated and their influence, especially how we could have multiple parties, but essentially we just have two?
If you'll allow me to start with a little neologism once again, it's not mine. I think I saw it somewhere, but I use it. So, you know the old saying, right? You use a word 3 times, it's yours. The Demoblican Party. We seem to have only one party in the United States, the Demoblican Party. It has 2 wings, and they certainly vie. It's a cutthroat war to get into power. But as far as policies are concerned, we don't have much of a choice. I often lecture in China, and I'm often asked the question, what is it with China being accused of being a one-party system? And people there point out that, look, you look at the Democratic platform and the Republican platform, and they're pretty much indistinguishable. So what's with it? We don't have this in Switzerland. And by the way, when I say we, I'm sort of adopting a point of view. I'm not Swiss, and I'm not even American. I am Canadian. I am Finnish. I am Greek. I am Chinese, and I could claim a Polish and a German passport if I wanted to. But like all of us, I care. That's why I say we. We have a different thing in Switzerland. We have a number of parties. There is, of course, a good and a bad to all this. A good is that pretty much every sector of the country is represented. So if you are a member of the purple, green, yellow, UFOs exist, whatever party, and if there's enough of you, a small number, you will have your rep elected to the parliament, and your voice will be heard. This is the good side. The bad side of the picture is that there's a lot of, if you like, splinter parties. You often have to cater to the views of not just one main party and one main opposition, but the entire spectrum, political spectrum. Is this so bad? I don't know, and I wouldn't want to presume. To my mind, something else kicks in here. All the parties know that none of them wields any decisive power, and all of them learn how to compromise with one another. This is something that is sorely missing in the United States nowadays. We are learning, we are being taught to hate and despise each other. And this just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We are still citizens of the same country. We ought to, I don't want to sound too, 60s or new agey, but we really ought to love each other. Because if we don't, well, you're going to do to me tomorrow what I'm doing to you today. And that just doesn't make any rational sense to begin with, no matter what your political views are. So there is a number of parties. There is a lot of fluctuation in support. In other words, the pretty much even spread that we have in the United States between the Democrats, the Democratic and the Republican wing of the Demoblican Party doesn't exist. You may be a member or you may support a party that polls, let's say, 21% this year. In a few years, you may drop to 6 or elevate to 31%. There is, people don't belong to a party as such. They simply vote with their conscience. They vote with their views, and whichever party happens to reflect them, that party gets the votes. So parties strive to learn what it is that people want, because they naturally want to get into power. And they can do it in one way only, to siphon as much support from average citizens as they can. Now, this provides for much less extremism, for much more compromise, even on the level of the individual party, okay? Which essentially brings most parties to the center, doesn't make them at all identical the way we have it. There is, I believe, 11, 13 major and minor parties in the parliament these days. So you do have your choice. But there is no, to my experience at least, and I've studied the problem, I cannot vouch for it, but in my experience, there is no extremism. And if there is, you can be sure that you will be basically left out. You will have your supporters, but that's it, because everybody else is providing a very healthy alternative. And you know, it's like walking into a food store and having 7 choices of bananas. Why would you opt for a plastic banana when you can have, one of the 7 that are actually fairly healthy? I hope that I've managed to convey something of an answer, yeah? Thank you.
Hi, I think I'm up here.
Okay, hi.
Well, because I purchased your book, now I have to purchase the other books and read them so I get a better understanding of your chapters.
Thank you.
But I was able to watch the movie Bulworth, which was very entertaining. And one of the things at the end of that chapter, you talked about the riots after Rodney King's beating.
Yes, 1992, LA.
Right, and the coverage by the news media of that, and how rather than looking at all the groups which were rioting, they focused in just on the Crips and the Bloods. And what I'm wondering is, as we've seen this past weekend with in Oakland, the fight between the Occupy group and then the different factions in that, is this another case where we will see the mainstream media focusing on one group because of the interest of the owners of that media that are not going to, since they are members of the 1%, are they going to be able to co-opt the actual meaning of that group or what they're trying to do? And another part of that is the cynical part of me is, would that 1% try to infiltrate these groups and try to take over and make it a more militant than the actual founders of the group is or are?
I thank you for the question. I think it's very profound, very penetrating, and it's also a question that I absolutely cannot give you an answer to. For a very simple reason, you are asking me for a forecast, for a prediction, and I am humble enough to realize that I'm actually very, very, very stupid. I know very little of what's going on because there is so much going on. There is so much information out there. It's impossible for any human being, any brain, any collective of brains anymore to wrap your head around of the amount of information available on just about any issue. Having said that, I don't want to give you an impression that I'm, that I have a tail, that I'm a weasel. So I can speculate, foolish as it is. The media does not represent what is going on. I don't even want to go into the simple observation that the very choice of a camera angle, the very choice of what's being left on the cutting room floor influences what you see. The important thing is not to get your news from any one source. And if I may be so bold as to suggest one, I was in pretty much the same situation, same quandary at one point, and Howard Zinn once again wrote to me and said, look, we've been writing for this little journal called The Progressive, I believe. So if you have a chance, look it up on the internet. It's still out there, and it does provide coverage of just about any piece of news you may wish to learn more about. And I assure you that its point of view, its focus will be quite different from what you would get from your local or national network. I'm not saying that it's going to be better or worse, it's going to be different. And this is the nature of the coverage. No matter how difficult it is, we need to triangulate. This is what I tell my students. I tell them, never believe any one source, and they nod wisely, and they think, okay, well, he's saying such, subversive, iconoclastic things, so he's probably the guy I can trust. Well, then very quickly, as you know, you have to point out to them that, no, you shouldn't trust me either. I don't tell them to mistrust me, I simply tell them to always go for 2 other news sources. If you can corroborate something from 3 independent, this is the keyword, independent news sources, then you can probably believe half of it. If not, at least you will find alternative views and points of views. And ultimately, it's not, this is my opinion, it's not for us to sit and passively absorb what we are being told by anybody, whoever it is, starting with Obama. We should be smart and educated enough and caring enough about our own fate, because this is our country, right? Democracy, this is our country. We are the people. To want to find out what's really going on. But you will never, one can never do that by, relying on any one media source. When I say one media source, I'm really grouping all the mainstream networks as, one source. There's very little difference between them. I think we all are, old enough and smart enough to realize it. So look for the alternatives, and then, vector all the 3 together, and then see what happens. So I apologize because I am being a weasel. I'm not giving you a straight answer. I do have views on that. And it seems to me that you implied a lot in your question very shrewdly. And it seems to me that I would not necessarily disagree with much of what you implied by asking this very question. But I don't want to commit myself simply because it's not my role. I'm not a truth teller, and no one ought to be. No one ought to be perceived as one. I'm just yet another alternative source of information. So factor me in, please. But then find out for yourself what's going on. That's the only way. Okay, I'm not running for office.
Okay. Yeah. You describe Switzerland as a very democratic country and a country where everybody has a chance to participate. Now, I understand that Switzerland was one of the last countries to allow women to vote. And I was wondering how you can explain that. It seems like a contradiction to me.
I'm very glad you asked this question. And if you ever have a chance to look at the book that I mentioned in passing, I haven't given you the title, it's called American Utopia and Social Engineering. I do bring this point up. So yes, I am very much aware of it. The year was, I believe, my memory eludes me, either 71 or 73. Let's say 1971. So fairly late that the Swiss populace in general decided to grant women the vote. I will give you the following answer. Women, and I checked that, constitute and have constituted the majority of Swiss population in every single year of the 20th century. So maybe I should redirect the question at you. How is it that women voters, having the majority, did not exercise that majority as is their due right and privilege? All I can conclude is that there were at least some women who were perfectly happy with the status quo as was in place. I can also assure you that there were several referenda over the decades in the 20th century that dealt precisely with this question. And on all of them, until 1971, the majority of the Swiss population voted, no, we don't want to make any changes. We are fine the way we are, and no changes were made. So what you touched on is an extremely, extremely important point, very explosive too, but I'm trying to diffuse it. What I'm saying is that if at any point, and I hope you'll grant me this, women in Switzerland, let's leave guys out of it, okay? Women are much smarter in general, we all know this. So if the smarter, greater half of the population ever decided that we want this, it would have happened. I guarantee you it would have happened, okay? They did not. So all I can conclude is that it was not in the women's interest to pursue that option until 1971. As a matter of fact, I will grant you even one more thing. By 1971, it was not so much the local pressure within Switzerland. It was simply the perception among the Swiss that, well, we just don't look good, do we? So finally, they decided to pass such a law. Women, if you like, did have the vote. Okay, it was not granted in constitutionally, but in referenda they did have a right to exercise, same rights as men. So in that sense, it was more of a political question, political point, political issue, rather than the, if you like, daily governance of the country. I realize that I haven't completely answered your question, but I hope I have suggested what is so specific about the Swiss system. Again, I don't want you to make a mistake. I'm not Swiss, as I told you. I'm not here I didn't get paid to come and proselytize on the behalf of the country. I'm not saying that everything in Switzerland works well. I'm not saying that I would endorse or embrace all the things they do. What I'm saying is that if I had a choice between the two systems, I personally would have no hesitation knowing which one I would like to live in, to live under. One part of this inclusiveness of the Swiss political system, as you probably figured out, is a certain inertia, conservatism, okay? Just because there's a lot of consultation, laws tend to get a little bit de-radicalized when they finally get to the voting stage, because everybody has had a chance to, shape it to their own liking. So in some ways, Swiss laws are a very curious hodgepodge of total progressivism. They do things, decades ahead of everybody else. And they also tend to lag behind. But you know what? It's their country. They decided to delay passing the law until 71. Nobody else. It wasn't the politicians. The politicians don't have that right. The politicians can pass laws, any laws they like. And we have the right to abolish, to get rid of these laws and get rid of the politicians who pass laws we don't like. It seems to me that the principle is absolutely, inviolable, intact. Practical results, as I said, should you and I find ourselves in Switzerland in, let's say, 1969, we probably both would realize that something needs to be done. And if you passed a petition, if you started the initiative, I certainly would have signed it. And I can almost guarantee you that there would be 100,000 Swiss citizens or 100,000 Americans here who would support this initiative, and we would have the national vote. This is what the system guarantees, okay? It doesn't guarantee you that you will get what you want, and it shouldn't, okay? You can be crazy, you can be an extremist, you can be a cook, we don't know. What it guarantees you is a right to express your political views and not foist them on the nation, but the right to ask the nation do you want to live in a country that has such a law? And then we give you the answer, yes or no. And that is precious, and we don't have that here. Opinion polls will tell you, has been telling you, for years and years and years, that Americans did not want to be in Iraq. That Americans wanted to pull out of Iraq immediately. And what? Nothing happened. We didn't have the right to change that. We could scream and, write petitions, nothing would change. In Switzerland, you simply post online, a well-formulated, legalistically approved statement to the effect, we should pass a law that would immediately, within 2 months, withdraw our troops from Iraq, or ban people from wearing glasses, or whatever it is you like. That's the power. That's the principle. And then you pitch it to the nation, and the nation tells you whether they stand with you or not. And if the polls were correct, and support for withdrawal was like 63, 67%, in the mid 60s to upper 60s, we would have been out of there. Please forgive me for saying this obvious thing, but we have invaded that country illegally, absolutely illegally, a sovereign country. We do not have this right. We have violated just about every international law there is in the book. We, the country that likes to think that we uphold laws, that we are truly the beacon, that we should be emulated. I don't know about that. Again, I apologize for the long-winded answer, but we're talking about the principles here on the basis of the one specific vote that you asked me about, okay?
I have a question. I'm wondering if you think the U.S., both spatially and population-based, is too large and too invested in foreign affairs to participate in a democracy such as Switzerland, and if theoretically we're a democracy but don't practice democracy as it ought to be, what then do you suggest our practice of governments is?
This is a truly stunningly brilliant question, and I will prove how brilliant I am by reading you an answer that I have formulated a long time ago to this very question. So great minds think alike, okay? I have here a copy of American Utopia and Social Engineering in Literature, Social Thought, and Political History. And please bear with me for just 10 to 15 seconds. I wish I had put little markers here. Okay. It's on page 87, by the way, if you ever want to take a look. Granted, Switzerland is small and the United States is big. The former has less than 8 million, the latter more than 300 million people. In area, Switzerland is smaller than Vermont and New Hampshire combined, so I was right about that. Or roughly 10% of California. What works for the small country may not be feasible in a colossus like America, exactly what you asked about. Or so argue the skeptics. Saturated as it is with phones, mobile phones, and internet terminals, however, not to mention the post office and the voting booth, the United States could institute national referenda with relative ease. America is not too big for real democracy. It lacks not the technology, but the political will to embrace constitutional referenda and other instruments of citizens' participation that directly contribute to political stability and personal happiness. I want to mention just one word, Bruno Frey, a Swiss scholar, Swiss scientist. I'm trying to convey to you that this is not anybody's utopian vision. This is solid scientific research. Look up Bruno Frey, the work he does in Switzerland. It is established, it is proven, it is a fact of the matter that there is a direct and strong correlation between direct democracy, i.e. active political participation in the political process as practiced by Switzerland, and personal happiness, the way people rank their lives, not politically, but in any term, on any scale, any dimension you can imagine, be it love, or satisfaction, contentment, fulfillment, whatever it is, and political stability, simply because we choose the system that we live in. It's my home, and I run it the way I want to run it. You don't want, look, you wouldn't want me to come to your place. You wouldn't want to invite me to your place tonight and then tell you how you cook your dinner that you're going to feed me or when you should go to the bathroom. I mean, that would be ridiculous. But that's exactly what happens. We have people telling us what to do, whereas it's our home. It's just, we don't treat it as such because we don't have the history and we don't have the mental space, the mental attitude that would make us feel like we're at home, like this is our thing. And we don't like these guys, we kick them out. Not because they're bums, some of them maybe, some of them are actually very hardworking people, politicians I mean. But so what? Not everybody who works hard works well, right?
I'm sorry, I know there are a few more questions. We've reached our deadline, 7:30 p.m. Please make sure you, next time, to ask your questions first. And thank you so much for a brilliant lecture, too.